I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stuff.
Am I going to get sued?
You got legal on this?
Let's send you out right now. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. I don't know if I was muted during the intro. Big sneeze. Had a big sneeze there. Don't know if anybody heard that.
I didn't either.
But here we are, Sam. My last day from Mom's basement and then hitting the road right after the show, jumping in the minivan, back to Cincinnati. We'll be back in the studio on Monday.
I mean, it's quite the glamorous life you lead.
It is. Kids are packing up as we speak. If you hear them, it's so we can hit the road. Today, Sam, we're talking training camp. We're talking training camp buzz. And for me, this isn't about let's just tell you about the players. I think we got to react to it. What should we listen to? What should we not listen to? What's real? What's not? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, there are one-play highlights of everybody all over the internet, and you have to decide if it's real or if it doesn't mean anything because it's one play.
All right, let's jump into a little bit of breaking news this morning. There's two pieces of news straight from the Bucs. First, they've re-signed left tackle Tristan Wirfs, massive deal. He was drafted in 2020, heading into the last year, his fifth-year option season. And so Tristan Wirfs is locked up now by the Tampa Bay Bucs. And you just sent me a note that Yaya Diaby, the second-year edge defender, who a lot of people around the league love, because he did have a lot of sacks. He's explosive. A lot of people love him. He just got carted off the field for the Bucs. So a couple pieces of news here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that last one is like properly hot off the press, like it happened 5 minutes ago, to the point where they're not even sure if it's his knee or if it's ankle. It's a leg injury of some description, and obviously the cart being involved indicates it's pretty serious, but we've no idea the extent to it. The seriousness of that for the Bucs, like outside of Diaby and what it means for him personally, is Tampa Bay's pass rush situation does not look tremendous given the players that they've lost, given where they are from a roster point of view. And I think Diaby was a pretty important part of what they were, what they are hoping for this season. So losing him would potentially be a big blow, force them to lean heavily on rookie Chris Braswell out of Alabama. So yeah, that would be a big blow for them if he is out for any kind of extended period of time. And then for Wirfs, you've got a guy who's now the highest paid offensive tackle in NFL history. And it makes sense, right? He's demonstrated that he can be an elite player on both the right side and the left side now. You are locking up a left tackle to protect Baker Mayfield's blind side, a pretty important position historically. So a good deal for Tampa Bay and for Tristan.
Yeah, Wirfs, remember, first 2 years played right tackle. Last year switched to left tackle. We did voice, potential concern. Do you actually need to do that? And he was awesome. He was able to make the move. He did that stuff at Iowa. Remember, played left and right tackle, had success in both spots. So, yeah, good job by Wirfs. He's been an excellent player since being drafted.
Yeah, 4 straight years with a PFF pass blocking grade above 80. In fact, above 82. 82.8 as a rookie was the lowest pass blocking grade of his career so far. 4 straight years at that level, I think, is probably unique in terms of today's tackles. I don't know that anybody has had 80-plus pass blocking grades for 4 straight years. I haven't checked that, but that's a very rare air to be keeping, and he's able to do it very well year in, year out, and either side of the line.
Just to touch on the edge situation really quick again for the Bucs, you mentioned Chris Braswell, drafted in the second round by the Bucs, has a chance to come up and would have to probably fill in for Diaby right away. They have Anthony Nelson, who's a good rotational player. Also have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. They did not pick up his fifth-year option. He's in the last year of his deal as a former first-round pick. He hasn't really lived up to what they were hoping, I don't think, as far as his development. So, and Shaq Barrett is not only, was off the team, but also just retired, but he was going to be gone anyway. So, yeah, it is a thin group for Tampa Bay rushing the passer. I guess the one bright side is it's Todd Bowles' defense. they rely on a lot of blitzing. They rely on their linebackers to get pressure. They're not a pure, four-man rush, get pressure type of team, but it still leaves them pretty thin at that position if Diaby is out for an extended period of time.
Yeah, and just makes it more difficult. If you have to rely on the blitz to generate pressure, it's obviously more difficult than just dialing it up because you like it situationally.
All right, Sam, we'll get into all the training camp buzz, but first, as a parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future, but investing can often be both confusing and time-consuming. But Fabric by Gerber Life makes it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. UGMA stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. So while your kids can invest while they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolio is managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Sam, you and I both made a list of people we're hearing the buzz from, right? We're hearing the buzz. Let's just go back and forth, listing players. And again, I think the most important thing, do you want to start with, what should we do with this information broadly when it comes to training camp? And do we want to start by trashing the aggregators? We should trash the aggregators, yeah?
Yeah, why not? Fire away.
Don't listen to the aggregators. Listen, there are context-free videos out there. And you're seeing a lot of NFL players chiming in. Old friend J.J. Watt, old friend Chris Harris, I saw, talking about this is an over route, with one step of separation and there's no one else on the field, right? You've got the entire field to try to get open as a receiver. Most of the highlights, of course, are going to be wide receiver DB interactions. Every now and again, you get this one-on-one interaction. It might be like a screen pass or something like that, right? Or it's not even a win. I think that's the one that gets me the most. Is when a pass rusher actually doesn't win, and they're like, look at this guy whooping. You don't even know what you're talking about. So don't get too caught up in the one-off aggregator videos. I do think the buzz perspective and who's doing well and who's not, I do think the beat reporters, I don't know that they see everything perfectly, but they can at least tell you, hey, this guy's flashing at camp, this guy's showing some stuff. I think there's way more information there than the one-off videos.
Yeah. I think the one-off video, so you're right. Number one, most of those aggregator accounts, they're taking a video that's already doing numbers and they're framing it in a way that maximizes clickbait, right? So most of the captions are deliberately controversial or wrong or antagonistic because they know that's the best way of maximizing the interactions, getting the likes, and at least one of those accounts has literally been sold to make money out of Twitter's algorithm, right? So it's designed to be wrong effectively and to annoy you. But that doesn't mean that the video itself doesn't have some substance to it, as much as a one-off rep can have in practice, which is to say not very much, right? Even the best players in the NFL are going to have reps here or there where they don't win or they lose or it looks bad. But I think you can learn some things from some of these videos, or at least sort of see things in action that you mightn't see otherwise. But I think you're right. The general approach to training camp, to practice, is being good, making good plays doesn't necessarily mean anything, really, but it can. Romeo Doubs, I think, is a classic example, right? That guy is the most dominant July football player on the planet. And as, what was he, a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick?
4th round.
Yeah, so Doubs showing up every July, there's something to that. He's a better player than the average 4th-round draft pick that essentially never becomes anything and doesn't stick. Right from day one, he started flashing in training camp and consistently outperformed the expectations, and he's now a part of that offense in the regular season. And maybe he's never going to be a great player, but he's a useful contributor on that offense, and he sort of reminds you that every July and August. So I think there are guys that you can see right away. And then, if you want to go at a higher level, Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, these were guys that were drafted in the 3rd and 4th round who immediately looked like a different player. Training camp, it became obvious, oh, look, we found something in this guy. He's not just going to be, a fourth round nobody career backup, like he might actually be something. So you can find these guys that immediately show up in training camp, look different, and now the story is changing. You can also find players like Dante Moncrief who show up every July in training camp and it's like, this is the year. And it never happens, right? Sometimes it doesn't mean anything, even if you're a consistently dominant training camp force. So, I think it's directional. It's probably directionally sound to look at these guys that are doing well or badly in training camp and saying, okay, let's at least throw that in the hopper and be aware of it as we head into the season. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be determining what they're going to be.
Dante Moncrief is your favorite historic comp when it comes to training camp hype. I think Romeo Doubs will take the cake. I am going to mention Doubs as one of my guys. I think there was a little small conversation to be had around that, but I'll let you kick things off here. Give me, by the way, I have some positive and negatives here. And so give me someone who's getting some training camp buzz, either positive or negative for you, Sam.
All right, I'll start off with Vikings wide receiver Jalen Nager. Who was particularly interesting because last season, right? He had, I think, he was stuck at the top of the PFF grading when you don't filter out, for sample size, when you don't filter out for playing time. Or maybe it was
it's definitive.
Yeah,
Definitely focus on that.
Right, or maybe it was 2022. But sometime in the last couple of years, the guy was, it was 2022. The rankings in terms of PFF grading goes Tyreek Hill, Jalen Naylor, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, right? So that's the kind of company that Jalen Naylor is keeping these days. But apparently he's been...
31 receiving snaps.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like I said, if you don't filter out the sample size, which to be clear, and in case this wasn't obvious, you absolutely should do. If you didn't do that, Naylor was right there at the top, and he's been apparently one of the most dominant players in Vikings training camp so far. The Vikings are one of those teams that actually does have an award for like the best training camp performer. They call it Mr. Mankato, and right now Jalen Naylor is in the lead to be Mr. Mankato in 2024.
Which puts him right in the running for our Dante Moncrief award.
Right. And so the difference, I was saying Moncrief is like the classic guy that dominates in July, and you're saying Doubs is going to be that. The difference is, I think Doubs has actually justified it and sort of shown up in the regular season in a way Moncrief didn't. If I was going to give out, the Dante Moncrief award every year for like best training camp performer, it has to be also attached to who also doesn't ever do it in the regular season. It's like only July and August, not September through January.
So what does this mean for the Vikings? Like if he is legit, they're looking for a high-end number 3. I mean, they're looking for probably a stretch the field type of number 3. I could see them wanting to work 2 tight ends quite a bit anyway and not have to rely on the 3. But you do have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison as your 1 and 2. Who knows does Addison potentially have a suspension looming or whatever it might be. Brandon Powell is in the mix there, but Naylor is very much in the mix. You're talking guys like Trent Scherf, really a deep group of wide receiver 3 options. And if Naylor becomes that guy, especially as a stretch the field type of threat, I think there's an opportunity there for the Vikings if he can carry it forward.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's an interesting receiving core because Jefferson is amazing, obviously, complete receiver, can do everything, lines up everywhere, just got the giant contract. You've got Addison, who's now a question mark based off his off-field issues. Brandon Powell, I think, is actually a really intriguing slot guy. I thought he was quite impressive when he was forced into a bigger role because of injuries last year. But yeah, Naylor, I think, does have a potential role there as a sort of designated deep threat. And maybe he is the guy that can step up and replace some of what they lose in Addison if Addison cops a suspension of some kind. He's not Addison. He's not the type of complete player that he is, but could potentially replace some of those missing elements. Yeah, I do think there's an opportunity there because of the departures they've had, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen the year before that. There are snaps there available for a guy like Naylor if he's able to continue that into preseason and, maybe force his way onto their plans.
Well, I've got J.J. McCarthy on my list, so if we want to stick with the Vikings, there are enough Vikings fans tweeting at us when we ask, hey, who's getting the buzz? You're seeing the super slow-mo. When you pull out the super slow-mo videos of J.J. McCarthy. He's, look at this. Look at this. Super slow-mo, getting the ball into a tight window.
This is the combination.
So there's the one that we're showing right here.
It's McCarthy to Naylor.
What's that?
It's McCarthy to Naylor. It's both sides.
The Naylor. It's perfect for our discussion right here. Well done, Mike. The McCarthy. So that was like a back shouldery type of throw with some zip. That was the type of throw that you saw from J.J. McCarthy. But one of the other throws I saw from J.J. was with a little bit of touch on it. We saw a touch throw. And so that was different. Those are the types of things that I'm looking for, Sam. I mentioned Drake May the other day. We'll talk about him in a minute. But how at camp his footwork looked better for like the one day that I was there. But I'm looking for the things that looked like weaknesses coming out of college. Can someone answer some of those questions? And JJ, I think with the touch pass, not the one that we showed, but a different one, a touch pass and that zip, beautiful throw in the end zone. He's got some big time throws in there so far during camp.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was generally assumed that Sam Darnold would start, would get a while as the starter, and then McCarthy comes in at some point. But the buzz is starting to sort of ask the question of, does McCarthy actually end up winning this job by the end of training camp, preseason? Like, does he start week 1?
So that's what happens with JJ. And then I wanted to stick with the Vikings there, but the guy I really wanted to highlight, I want to talk about Romeo Doubs just for one more minute, because he's getting the hype again. And as you mentioned before, he's also a good NFL receiver, right? This isn't like mutually exclusive. Jair Alexander, they asked him who the best receivers are in the league, and he said Devontae Adams, fair, and Romeo Doubs. And I'm like, wow, that's, this is Romeo Doubs. Nobody gets more hype in July and August than Romeo Doubs. So I tweeted out, Romeo Doubs is the best August receiver of our lifetime. I think he might be. And that doesn't mean he's not good in the regular season. Like, both things can be true. But remember, 2 years ago when he shows up at camp, he's wearing number 87. He's replacing Devontae Adams. Kind of has some movement skills that look like Devontae. Aaron Rodgers was looking for a top guy, and he was getting those comps, and he had plays that looked like Devontae Adams. So since he stepped on to a training camp field, we've heard Romeo Doubs with incredible comparisons. And yes, he has carried some of that play over into the regular season and the postseason as well.
Yeah, he's interesting because there are players every year, and preseason games you see this maybe more than training camp, but there are players every year that crush preseason, right? And maybe there's such a difference between preseason, the sort of second team versus first team thing, that crushing preseason does not necessarily mean that you're even a viable NFL player in terms of rotation, in terms of being a starter or whatever. But there are these guys every year that sort of, again, normally I think it's kind of directional. Like, if you have a guy that's absolutely destroying preseason games, or the second team, let's say, I want to at least find out how that translates against the first team, and at least give them opportunities to do that. Remember Stephen Means was always a guy that every preseason, that guy's got like a 93 pass rushing grade, gets like 15 pressures in limited snaps. It's like, all right. And Stephen Means was not really good enough to do that against the first team guys and top tier left tackles, but let's at least find that out based off this performance. And Doubs is fascinating because that guy will destroy pretty much anybody in a training camp environment, and maybe preseason as well. And it does translate to the NFL in terms of he's good, but he doesn't look like he's ever going to be great. And I think that's sort of almost where the difference in competition changes his ceiling, I think, between training camp and preseason and the regular season. Like, he's good enough to be a very useful receiver, number 2, number 3 in the offense, be a really important part of that team. But it does look like he's kind of banging his head against this glass ceiling, and maybe he can't ever become, regular season Devontae Adams in addition to being preseason Devontae Adams.
All right, so Doubs was the guy I brought up. J.J. McCarthy was one of my guys. You're up. Give me another training camp buzz player.
So a lot of mine are wide receivers. I think they're the obvious position that flashes in training camp, just because flashing catch is easy to see. It's their reps are kind of set up in their advantage as well. You remove a lot of the clutter, blah blah blah. Rookie wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jalen McMillan, the third wide receiver out of Washington, I guess, if you like, has been consistently impressing. Rick Stroud had a tweet, Jalen McMillan with a nice catch over the middle from Baker Mayfield. He continues to impress. There's a lot of his highlights out there. I really feel like he's going to be able to hit the ground running and be, a fairly high volume number 3 in that offense. You've got obviously Mike Evans, you've got Chris Godwin. I think they're going to find a way of accommodating McMillan and making him like a pretty significant part of this team.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot of Bucks so far today because of the breaking news, but also McMillan and that hype. And when we broke down the Bucks draft in April, that was kind of what we said, right? Which was they drafted a lot of players who I don't think are great necessarily. I don't know if they're going to be stars, but they have some guys that can contribute right away. Jalen McMillan as a potential number 3 wide receiver in year 1, maybe an eventual replacement to Chris Godwin, who's in the last year of his contract, making over $20 million a year as well. We mentioned Chris Braswell earlier, a guy that can jump right into the rotation as just a good edge setter who can rush the passer a little bit, right? I mean, that I think really typified the Bucs draft is their first 4 or 5 picks can all be contributors. So you've got McMillan getting all this buzz at camp, and the other 2 Washington receivers as well, right? I mean, everything that you hear out of Chicago, Rome Odunze is as advertised. Can't believe the Bears have Odunze and Caleb Williams coming out of the same draft class. The other piece is Jalen Polk coming out of New England, right? He's one of the 2 rookie receivers getting some buzz there as well. There's 2 of the guys I wanted to highlight. You're hearing a lot from Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, the 2 rookie receivers in New England.
I mean, I asked this at some point during the process, but I wonder how many teams in the NFL had a better wide receiver trio than the University of Washington last year. And that wasn't to say that they had a top 3 NFL unit, but my point was more, it's not all of them. I would guarantee you there are not 32 NFL teams that had a better trio than that group last season. And I think we might actually be seeing just how legit that group was. If Odunze is as advertised, if Polk is as he's been doing in training camp, and if McMillan is this, high-end 3rd receiver for Tampa Bay, if that's the level that trio is at, there's quite a few NFL teams last year did not have a group as good as that.
I mean, that was like LSU, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. I mean, that 1-2 punch, and then seeing them as rookies the next year, it's wow, maybe that's incredible. It's tricky as an evaluator too sometimes, right? You're watching Washington, and it's man, all 3 of these guys are good. I think Odunze is definitely the best guy, but you can't forget these other 2. I think I had the same feeling coming out of LSU. Justin Jefferson was playing in the slot, right? I mean, that was one of his knocks was just seeing him play on the outside more, see it enough. And if he was on another team, you probably get more opportunities to see Justin Jefferson's greatness. But he's sitting there with Jamar Chase. And it's also interesting because sometimes we try to downplay quarterbacks in these situations. Because my first instinct, Sam, is well, this is what Michael Penix Jr. was throwing to. Of course, he's thrown to 3 NFL receivers. But that doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes you get a guy out of Alabama or the old school USC teams where it's you've got 3 All-American caliber pass catchers, and that helps the quarterback who's not that great. But we saw Joe Burrow throw to Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and friends at the college level. Didn't change the Burrow evaluation, but does that bring anything up about Michael Penix Jr., the fact that he had these 3 dudes to throw to at the college level?
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant context, right? I don't think any of us know how much that actually impacts a guy's evaluation, but you have to at least be factoring it in. You make up your own mind whether you want to sort of negatively adjust Michael Penix's tape because of it. However you want to do with that information, it's up to you. I don't think there is a right answer right now. But if you're not even factoring it in as information that's relevant to the discussion, I think you're deliberately ignoring what is a fairly key variable in quarterback play, who he's throwing to.
All right, so since you brought up McMillan, I brought up Jalen Polk of the Patriots for a minute. Let's stick with the Pats and their group because I had a couple different Patriots here. On the positive side, it's the 2 rookie receivers, 2nd and 3rd round picks, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Those guys are flashing. They have a path to the field, right? Juju Smith-Schuster, probably Kendrick Bourne. Those guys aren't going to keep the rookies from playing if they're ready to go. But on the negative side, I have Drake May on my list, right? I talked about during one day of being at camp and his footwork looked better, but there really wasn't a lot of positives out of Patriots camp the day that I was there. But once they put the pads on this week, it's been a rough go for Drake May. Because we got to see the completion percentages now. It's training camp. Completion percentages are coming out. He was 3 for 11 in one of his practices. He's something like 11 for 25 over his first 2 padded practices. What do we do with this information, Sam? Drake May struggling, and his rookie receivers looking pretty good so far.
Yeah, I mean, so this was another element of Chris Forster, I think, had a big rant. It wasn't clear when this rant was, so it might have been an old one. But he's the offensive line coach for San Francisco, who also has some other things that you might be familiar with as reasons you know who Chris Forster is. You know, if you throw his name into Google, you might find some other things in addition to offensive line coach for the San Francisco 49ers. Anyway, he's a really smart guy, and I actually really like listening to him articulate various thoughts when it comes to football. And he hates, in particular, one-on-one drills, because, again, this is where a lot of these videos come from. And he says, like, the big problem with one-on-ones is the outside media has no idea if a guy is being instructed to go out there and work on a specific thing in a one-on-one drill, right? And if he is, number one, it means he's probably not great at that individual thing right now, which is why they're working on it. Number two, it means he's inherently disadvantaged in the drill because not only is he doing the thing he's worse at, but he's only doing the thing he's worse at, which means he's limited in what he's going to be doing in that given drill. So generally, if you're just tweeting, you know, this guy's getting lit up in this drill one-on-one, yeah, sure, but you're missing the picture. Like he's kind of supposed to be, given what they're asking him to do. And I think the same thing is true with quarterbacks as well. You have no idea in the, 3 for 11 period or whatever, if that guy is being asked to go out there and work on something specifically and target this, the defense doesn't care. They're just doing their own thing. They're not like accommodating the quarterback's specific aim on a given rep. So, remember there was a preseason where Patrick Mahomes had thrown some ungodly number of interceptions. It was like, should we be worried about Mahomes? And then, no, it turns out he's the greatest quarterback to ever step foot on an NFL field, right? Evidently, for whatever period that was, Patrick Mahomes was just pushing the boundaries of what he could get away with, or simply copped an extremely crappy end of variance and threw a ridiculous number of interceptions in a short period of time. The point being, it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
By the way, Brock Purdy is going through that right now. The interceptions are flowing in Niners camp. And Purdy said, yeah, this is what we've heard this every single year. I've heard Aaron Rodgers say this, Purdy saying the same thing. We're trying different things, right? I'm trying to throw the ball into a tight window. I'm trying to look off Fred Warner and seeing if he'll bite and then just chucking it and seeing what happens. That is the time to do that. As a former professional athlete, Sam, I can relate a little bit here because, I was in Brewers camp my first year, and I always threw a curveball, right? Threw a curve, and I needed a slider. Needed to learn a slider. So I'm sitting there about to go into a minor league game, and I'm sitting there with one of the pitching coaches. I'm like, hey man, I need to learn a slider, and he teaches me a slider on the spot as I'm warming up to get into the game. And in my head, I'm thinking, great, I'm going to work on this for the next couple of weeks, and might have a slider soon. And it said something like that to him. He goes, no, just throw it today. Like, no, I can't just throw my new pitch today. I was playing up to a double-A game at the time, young. And it's like, but that was what he expected. Now, it was different there because it wasn't like he was communicating up the chain with the Brewers like, hey, if Palazzolo sucks today, don't worry, it's because I just taught him a slider. But that was like a decision I had to make for my career. Do I actually work on this new pitch and try to get better, or do I need to continue to look good because I'm always fighting for my job? So it is interesting because you do those types of things, and if you are good at, as long as the communication's clear, then you can do that, right? But you're right. It is funny when the media doesn't necessarily know that, and we react to that stuff.
Well, it's the training camp equivalent of that blind spot that people always complain about, which is, if you're not in the meeting room and you don't know the play call, you can't necessarily criticize a blown coverage or whatever, or identify who screwed up on a given play. Every snap is potentially that in training camp, and yet for some reason, once you get, it's the first football for months, so everybody just throws that variable out of the window and nobody cares, right? It's like, oh, look at this rep. He got wrecked. It's like, yeah, but you've no idea what they were asking him to do on that rep. We're just assuming that was a, perfectly balanced, no bias, no instruction, one-on-one rep, and therefore this outcome is completely legit and is actually instructive for what's going to happen going forward. And maybe it is, but we've no way of knowing that, which is why, I think the point you made earlier, the more important thing is a consistent level of buzz or, a consistent level of one thing or the other rather than individual plays.
All right, so what, Drake May specifically, should we look into this at all? Because I just want to compare it a little bit to Mac Jones. Mac Jones a couple years ago was kind of trending the other way. Our friend Greg Bedard covers the Patriots. I heard him say this the other day. I'm just going to echo it, but I remember it as well. With Mac Jones, when they were covering him as a rookie in New England, it was he was stacking improvement from minicamp through training camp, and it culminated in this big training camp performance. Cam Newton was sick or whatever, maybe he had COVID or whatever it was. Cam Newton missed the joint practice with the Giants. Mac Jones goes out there, takes 1 million reps, goes something 45 for 50 passing, right? And again, completion percentage for whatever they are. But Mac Jones would just stack big days and completions leading up to being the starter and being a pretty good rookie for the first 10 games or so of his career. You're not getting that from Drake May. Now, completely different situation, different schemes, new coaching staff, still have questions about the offensive line, have questions about the receivers outside of these two rookies who are flashing. So do we do anything with this information, or do we just say, look, who cares what Mac Jones did? Who cares what another QB did? Everybody can develop differently. And, let's just move forward and see what happens.
I think you store it in the back of your mind that, okay, Drake May so far has been struggling. Now, if that continues to be the case into August, through preseason, if we're hearing nothing but Drake May is struggling, then yeah, maybe that's a problem. And maybe that is what keeps him on the bench and Jacoby Brissett starting at the start of the year. But if this is just a bad week in July, then it's kind of irrelevant, right?
Probably is. It's probably irrelevant. I did remind people last year, C.J. Stroud's first pass off was horrendous.
Yeah.
We overreacted to that. Everybody, C.J. Stroud's not ready. Turns out he had one of the best rookie seasons of all time.
To be fair, I think a lot of those instant reaction tweets to that one pass were jokes. I'm pretty sure I fired off a joke about it. I've seen enough. Stroud's not going to make it.
Oh, I know. Of course. Most of us were joking. There's enough people that are serious. All right, your turn.
All right. I can't believe this isn't sort of top of everybody's list. But Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams is clearly, hype machine this offseason. There's a quote and a sort of tweet from Nick Baumgartner about Jameson Williams. The quote from the article, which is on the New York Times / The Athletic, fans have gone bonkers every time Williams gets behind a defender in practice, but his sideline route running and body control on quick outs have been Amon-Ra St. Brown good through the first weeks. Williams said he spent time in Los Angeles with Jared Goff this summer, and their improved chemistry is evident as he works to become one of the guys. It's not hype, it's just what's happening. So Dan Campbell has been out there praising Jameson Williams all the way through this offseason program. The beat reporters are praising Jameson Williams all the way through this process. The guy is not just a deep threat, he's just better now.
If this is real, the Lions hype is just going to be through the roof, because they're good if he's just a deep threat, right? They're good if he just becomes what I had kind of hoped that he would become, in that Mike Wallace, Will Fuller, that type of Henry Ruggs, that type of guy who's just going to take the top off the defense, body catches the ball a little bit too much, and you'll have some drops and inconsistency. If he was just that guy, I think that's enough, because they have Amon-Ra St. Brown and they have Sam Laporta working the underneath stuff. If Jameson Williams actually becomes more of a well-rounded receiver, because those were some of his weaknesses, right? Just feel on the underneath routes, just feel. Like one of his first targets, did he hook up at the right depth, then kind of lost his balance and it was incomplete from Goff a couple of years ago. If he just tidies up some of that stuff and then, becomes the guy that takes the top off the defense. We saw him on that end around last year, 40, 50 yards. When he gets the ball in the open field, he's incredibly fast. big-time playmaker. Yeah, that's scary for the Detroit offense. And Ben Johnson's going to give him an opportunity to be in space. I mean, that's the Lions' offense, right? You still have Jahmyr Gibbs back there as well. Good luck covering all these Lions, especially if Jameson Williams has polished up parts of his game here this offseason.
Yeah, and really, I don't think there's any reason he can't. I mean, he had all the talent to do that. He had the ability to be a high-end route runner as well. I don't see any reason he would be limited to just this designated deep threat. I think it could be for real. Like, he was a young receiver. Obviously, his career didn't start the way he wanted it to. But, I mean, I'm not willing to discount this as a possibility given the number of people that are talking about it, and the fact that Dan Campbell, according to that, what is that, Coach Speak translator or whatever it is, Dan Campbell gets high scores. Index. Yeah, there you go. Campbell gets high scores for telling the truth. So, could be real.
It's all that coffee, truth serum, when you have 15 shots every single day. By the way, there's also hype for Marcus Davenport when they put the pads on. Ennis Rakestraw, the rookie second rounder out of Missouri. I mean, they've got a lot of hype coming out of Detroit for some of the players that if they hit Davenport, Rakestraw, Jameson Williams, it makes an excellent team even better.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, my turn. Let's finally go to the offensive line here. I'm going Tyler Guyton from the Dallas Cowboys. I was critical of Tyler Guyton. I was critical of the pick. I thought he was one of the most questionable picks. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but the early returns, just based off a few reps against Micah Parsons plus other reports, looking pretty good, Tyler Guyton. So let's preface this. What looked good in those reps? The thing that Guyton always had at Oklahoma, his grip strength was incredible, right? We said this throughout the process, whether you're watching his Oklahoma tape, his Senior Bowl tape, when he locks on, when his rep is good, it looks like a Pro Bowler. However, there were a lot of bad reps in there too, and when it was a bad rep, he looked like a backup, right? I mean, so it was a consistency issue. So the fact that we've seen a few good reps doesn't necessarily change that. But a few good reps against Micah Parsons, yeah, that's intriguing, especially if he's tidied up some of his technique issues. And if Dallas, they have a chance to maybe hit on another first-round offensive lineman, he's replacing Tyron Smith. He is one of the most important draft picks in the draft because of what Dallas is relying upon with Tyler Guyton here at left tackle.
Absolutely. I mean, that would be an incredible, like we said it before, Dallas has been probably the best drafting team in the NFL over the last few years. If they've actually put themselves in a spot where they needed to nail a couple of draft picks and nail the couple of draft picks they needed to nail and just keep on trucking, it really would be an impressive job by them.
It is. So, again, what do we make of it? Put it in the back of your mind, right? That maybe Guyton is going to develop and maybe get there a little bit sooner, even if he does have his rookie ups and downs. But again, it's an important piece for the Cowboys if they're going to live up to the hype. They're relying on him as much as any team is relying on a first-round pick here.
And remember, I think Guyton is a Duke Manyweather guy, so just Duke stacking up W's. Give him another.
Maybe we'll see. We will see.
Just saying,
Duke.
If it works out,
So that's going to make me roll the Duke. That's not a part of the model yet, but if that's a new variable that the Duke players are going to be making incredible improvements, you got to factor that in.
Got to put it in the model. Duke, yes or no?
I do want to highlight PFF Plus. Can we do that for a minute here?
I think
because
so.
We got a sick promo code, 25% off with NFL Show 25% off PFF Plus. You get some incredible fantasy rankings. Our friend Nathan Yankee reminded us he's the most accurate in the business based off Fantasy Pros accuracy competitions. And my own personal, successes. Remember, I used to always brag about the Dynasty League, the expert Dynasty League that I dominated. That was off of an incredible draft. I just had an incredible draft. I used PFF's rankings. That's how you come away with DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Travis Kelce at the right times years before. And that great draft set me up for championships for 4 out of 6 years in an experts league, just because I had the PFF rankings. So that's what you get with PFF Plus. You also get the fantasy mock draft simulator where you can import your league, practice your draft with realistic settings before having your real draft. So go get it right now. NFL Show 25 is the promo, 25% off your PFF Plus subscription, everything you need to get ready this fantasy season. All right, Sam, your turn.
Okay, well, let's stick with the offensive line. Bengals offensive lineman Amarius Mims, the one of the members of the Fogo de Chao, I don't know what you call it.
Hypothetical outing.
Hypothetical outing that we want to create with you and the other offensive linemen. Amarius Mims has been apparently extremely impressive in training camp so far. The Bengals have this cool tradition, I guess, where the first round right tackle gets number 71. It's just the thing that they've always done. So number 71, Amarius Mims, ready there for the offensive tackle play, has been impressive in training camp. A large part of it is, I think it's always hard to discern with guys like Guyton or Mims. The athleticism, the physical tools are insane, which is why they were drafted where they were in the first place. That part isn't shocking, right? But it's jarring when you see it for the first time. It's like, wow, look at the way that guy moves. But that wasn't the issue. Like, that wasn't why you would be concerned about them, or not concerned, but like why you would be a little hesitant, say, when you're evaluating him as a draft prospect. Like, nobody's ever doubted that he's a giant freak show that moves like few people on earth. It's, well, okay, how does that work over 1,000 snaps, et cetera, et cetera. So those guys flashing in training camp, I think, absolutely makes some sense. It's more of a that's the one where you need to see it week on week on week. Let's stack these types of performances and make sure there's no drop-off anywhere. But so far, everybody has been extremely impressed by Mims.
Yeah, it's interesting because we mentioned this a little bit during evaluation time. For receivers, it's more visible at camp, but receivers also like a flash position. You are allowed to contribute if you just do a whole bunch of good things here and there. Offensive linemen, when we talk about Guyton, when we talk about Mims, if you just do a couple good things here and there, that's fine. But it does come down to you got to be good for 60 reps in a game. So you always take those with a grain of salt. But it's a good start. Trent Brown missing practice early on, gave Mims a little bit more opportunity. Love what the Bengals did there to draft Mims, to bring Trent Brown in as a one-year buffer. They added a little bit of security there on the line while they develop Mims and give him the reps that he needs. So I think that's huge for the Bengals. I'm going to stick with Cincinnati as well because you know where the hype's going, Sam. It's Jermaine Burton. Because he's hyped because every time he makes a play, people tweet it to me. So they know that I'm the king of the fan club over here. I'm the president. So I see the Jermaine Burton hype, but it's not just him, right? Andre Yusevich, we're seeing Charlie Jones, all of those potential number 3 receivers in Cincinnati. To me, it seemed like they're getting talked up here. So I think no matter what, that bodes well for the Bengals that they might have pretty good options at 3 and 4 when it comes to receiver this year.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't shock me at all if, again, Jermaine Burton is an immediate contributor, a guy that's, a significant part of his offense from day one. There were a number of players that were drafted outside of that first round, a number of receivers in particular, drafted outside that first round that you're like, there's a real pathway to being one of the top 3 receivers for this offense right away. Burton is definitely that guy. So, yeah, I mean, and again, Burton's question marks were never about what he would do on the field. Like maybe a little bit that would keep you away from drafting him in the first round, even if his off-field or character or whatever was completely clean. But generally speaking, nobody had a problem with his tape. It's everything else. So if you keep him in order, he should be good.
So that's my guy, Burton. Do you have anyone else to add here? I got a few more.
Not for the Bengals. So a couple of people tweeted me. I asked a question on Twitter, like who's getting the buzz right now. A couple of people tweeted out. I never remembered how to say this guy's name. Dylan Laub. Is that how you say it for the Raiders?
I think Laube. I think Laube? He's on my list. Dylan Laube.
Yeah. So a couple of people tweeted me that he was getting a lot of buzz and some praise from Antonio Pierce and Getsy.
Including Dylan's brother, I believe, tweeted at us.
I was literally about to say that. Having said that, the name of the person that tweeted this one at me is Jordan Laube, and that raises some questions about the source of this information that I'm passing on. But
beyond Jordan, there's also other people talking up Laube.
Because multiple people brought up Laube, I think it's fair to throw his name in the hat, even if this particular pronouncement is potentially biased.
I had him and Brock Bowers. I had both of those guys together. Because, of course, Bowers is going to be running with the ones and having opportunities. But, you're hearing about his body control and his hands and his red zone ability. All that stuff is real. A lot of times with red zone ability, we think about a Gronk type, a big-bodied tight end. But, Travis Kelce doesn't have that type of body. He's a red zone weapon. Brock Bowers is going to be more along those lines. He's just going to get open, knows how to shield defenders, and he's got strong hands to catch the ball. I think Bowers becomes a weapon right away. Lauby's showing that. He's a pass-catching running back that we saw a bunch of flashes at the Senior Bowl and at UNH. So yeah, I think both of those guys, because you're not hearing as much from the QBs in Raiders camp, either Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, even though O'Connell has stacked up some incredible preseason games in his short career. We'll see what happens there, but certainly the rookie playmakers making some noise at Raiders camp.
Yeah, Lauby.
So I had both of those guys.
Lauby's got definite ability, I think, to be a third down back for that team there. Receiving grades at PFF were crazy throughout his entire career. He averaged almost 2 yards per route run last season, which for a running back is an insanely high number.
Huge.
His 3-cone and change of direction numbers were absolutely ridiculous in terms of measurables. So another guy with, again, real pathway to being a contributor on offense for them.
All right, I got another name to throw out here. Justin Fields.
Oh.
Now, I'm not getting all the story, I don't know, from Justin Fields, but there's enough. Deep ball here and there, and you're running with the ones, and Russ hasn't been practicing. Like, there's enough groundswell here, Sam. There's enough where if you told me 2 weeks ago who's starting for the Steelers, I would tell you like 95% it's Russ. But there's enough of a groundswell here that I'm thinking maybe Justin Fields actually has an opportunity to start. Maybe not week 1, but at some point the Steelers might actually look to him this season.
I mean, I've always thought that was within the range of outcomes. But, Dano, I think, was on, I forget which ESPN show, but Dano was out there saying, look, effectively asking the question of what is the point in Russell Wilson at this stage, right? Like, if Wilson plays well this season, what are you going to do? Give him a big money contract at 36, given where he is in his career? No. Like, you're probably going to be moving on anyway. So aren't you actually invested as the Steelers in finding out what Justin Fields can be in this offense? At which point, shouldn't you just sort of see this as a gift? We've been given the opportunity to put Justin Fields into the starting lineup because Wilson is unavailable for a period of time. Let's just roll with it and see what we can do here. And I think
Dano also has 22 QBs in his top 10. I think it was I don't know if it was McAfee that finally called him out on it. But if you follow Dan, I like Dan's analysis. He does the negative to the quarterbacks, right? He kind of skews in that direction where if a QB is struggling, let's criticize the coach or the play caller, the receivers, let's blame them. It's not the quarterback, right? There was a point where he called Carson Wentz a top 7 quarterback when I think Wentz had already dropped well below that. So I think when Dan finally got called out, he was like trying to come up with a top 10. He's like, I could have 20 guys in here. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, based off how positive you are about a lot of these quarterbacks, I could see you thinking that. But yeah, Dan's positive with the QBs.
He is, but I do think that first point is actually a reasonable one, which is like, if the best case scenario for Russell Wilson is he plays well, he gets you to the playoffs, maybe wins a game, and then you're in this really difficult contractual situation with him, is what can you do with that based off his age, where he is in his career, and the kind of money he's going to want at that point? Like, what contract does that end up being next offseason? If it works out well, you're in a really difficult spot. If it doesn't work out well, you're turning to Fields by week 6 anyway, in which case, why not just give him the season and see what he can do based off what we've seen, not just from him in training camp, but in the NFL so far, where he has improved year on year, where he is growing as a passer. I'm kind of buying the argument now, the longer this goes, that, I mean, just let him win the job. Like, it's not like Russell Wilson is coming from this incredible height where you're like, it's his job until, like, they're both new in the building and Fields is getting the opportunity right now. If he's showing well, I don't see why you don't just flip the depth chart order.
So we've also seen in recent years, and look, I'm as guilty as anyone when it comes to, here's a first-round quarterback. If he doesn't show enough, move on, because you, as a team, you can't afford to sit there and hope he develops. But as a second opportunity, we've seen in recent years Baker Mayfield in his 4th opportunity show up and get the Bucs to the playoffs last year. We've seen Geno Smith in his next opportunity 10 years later, take advantage of it, get the Seahawks to the playoffs. There is something to that. And I'm intrigued by Arthur Smith, right? I think some of the criticism of Arthur Smith, the head coach, is a little bit too much because Arthur Smith, the play caller in Tennessee, was part of the Ryan Tannehill rejuvenation and teams that were very, very good all the way to the AFC Championship too, and had a number one seed and all that. So I'm intrigued by Fields now. I'm with you. I'm like more open to the idea that this is a possibility and that some of the weaknesses of Fields, if they can either improve those or mask those a little bit with a new system and the run-heavy system with all the tight ends that Pittsburgh has and the way they want to play, there could be something there.
So I've got two more players that I want to mention who I am both emotionally invested in, but also have multiple verified people telling me that they are currently justified recipients of buzz. So number one, and literally every single tweet in my direction had the exact same wording. So the question was, who's getting all the training camp buzz right now? Several people, like more than 3, tweeted at me, your boy Mingo, Jonathan Mingo, apparently impressing in Panthers camp so far. So there's been tons of videos out there of Xavier Legette making big plays. Adam Thielen, I saw, had a nice grab in the end zone, highlight reel video. But my boy Mingo, year 2, hidden away from where he's not very good, is apparently impressing.
Fully justified here, Sam.
Let's go.
Even if he doesn't catch a pass in the regular season, you nailed it.
Just a crumb of hope being thrown my way from training camp in year 2. So, look, again, I do think that there's something to the idea of, like, there was a similar discussion with Keon Coleman and how he should be used. I do think that Mingo was playing out of position last year in addition to playing like crap last year. Like, let's not disguise that, right? I'm not trying to say Mingo was great last year. He was just out of position. He played terribly. I do also think he was played out of position, and maybe in the correct place and in the correct role, he might look a lot better year 2. This is at least a step in that direction. And then the other one that, again, multiple people pointed out was Ravens guard Andrew Voorhees. And if you don't remember his story, he was the guy that tore his ACL at the combine doing, I think it was an ACL, right? Doing a drill, like the mirror drill, the wave drill, whatever they call that thing. Tore his ACL down and then did the bench press with crutches. Like he had his leg in an air cast, crutched his way out to the bench, repped out like 30-something reps with his busted leg hanging off the edge of the bench. And like that was his, so obviously year 1, a complete write-off for him recovering from that. But he could start for the Ravens this year. Like remember, they've had that turnover on the offensive line. Those guard spots are open to be won. And Voorhees, like the last time we saw him in college, was a really good grade, 80-plus grades in both run blocking, pass blocking. The year before that was 90-plus grades. Like the last 2 seasons we saw from him starting in college were top-tier offensive line seasons. The toughness, dude, I would ride with that guy to the death based off that story alone, and he might have himself a pathway to a starting position.
It's a huge story for the Ravens because, as you mentioned, there was a lot of turnover on that offensive line. It's pretty much just Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum coming back as starters. Then whatever you want to call Patrick McCarry as a third tackle plus a guard potential. But I also got tweeted Daniel Fa'alele moving to guard for the Ravens, the big monster, 360-pound right tackle moving to guard. So those are the stories that fascinate me. I'm kind of, as a football nerd, is when you're watching a team building effort and it's saying I want to have this known commodity. And when you have a known commodity, it's easier for us to say, hey, I feel good about this team, this offensive line, this position group, because here are the known commodities. But the teams have the information. They knew Voorhees and his development. They know Fa'alele and their plan with him, or Ben Cleveland, or whatever it might be. What did the Ravens know? How much do they trust their next man up at a couple of these positions? And then seeing that play out. Not that they're necessarily right. The Bills are kind of doing something similar this year with their youth movement, right? They know enough about their younger players that are going to take over for their bigger name veteran players. And I love watching that play out. So the Ravens offensive line, I think, is a really fun story to watch because of how they've built it, and guys like Voorhees, as you mentioned, because of his story.
I want to preface this by saying I have yet to see a single snap of this in action, but I actually really like the theory of moving Daniel Faalele to guard. So you've got guys like DeJuan Jones, right? These sort of monster, mammoth, behemoth offensive tackles. And a lot of the times those guys don't necessarily have the athleticism to hang on the outside. I think DeJuan Jones does. And I think the other thing is, in the past, those guys would be pegged as right tackles, right? That label, right tackle only, right? Which in theory means really good run blocker, doesn't really have the footwork or the athleticism for pass blocking chops, but we'll put him on the right side and that's okay. That's no longer okay in today's NFL. Right tackle only is a guard. And because if you don't have the footwork, if you don't have the movement skills to hang against top tier pass rushers, you can't play tackle. Doesn't matter if it's right or left. Right just means the quarterback is more likely to see the hit coming when it's happening, but you're still getting whooped. So right tackle only being a guard makes perfect sense for a guy like Faalele because he looked like a guy that would have been labeled as a right tackle only based off what we've seen from him so far. He doesn't have the movement skills of a guy like DeJuan Jones or any of these other sort of behemoth offensive tackles, but he does have massive size, brute strength. Like, I'm curious to see how he does at guard.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Sam. The whole thing, right tackle only, putting him at guard, and I'm interested in the Ravens and their evaluations for how they want to build that line. I'll just mention my last couple players, and then I want to touch on the other interesting thing that came out of Hard Knocks and the Giants draft board in a minute here, and just get your take on that. But the first guy I want to mention, Mason Tipton, wide receiver for the Saints. Lot of buzz for undrafted free agent. And look, the undrafted free agent world, it almost feels like you almost know right away when a guy has a chance to make the roster. That's what we're hearing from the Saints. Mason Tipton out of Yale. And let me know if this fits the Saints, Sam. Runs 4.33. Went back, watched some of his Yale film. Incredible body control down the field. Good ball. He tracks the ball really well. Good ball skills. Have they found their next Deontay Hardy, Rashid Shaheed? Now it's Mason Tipton, their 2 to 3 deep shots per game, 25 yards per catch guy. Have they found their next guy in Mason Tipton? Maybe.
I love the draft that you can watch a million wide receivers and then still you get to training camp and there's a guy you never got to that's like carving it up and like cooking people out of Yale.
It ran a 4.33, and he's got big playability and just kind of fits the mold of what the Saints have done in the past with those undrafted types, where it's like this guy's taking the top off the defense. So I think he's got a potential role with the Saints. A lot of people tweeted at me about Laiatu Latu with the Colts. Yeah, that he's hit the ground running and that he's doing a nice job. And I follow a lot more Bills people, Cover One, that whole site and everything, and so they do a really good job breaking down the Bills from all angles. They've been hyped about Keon Coleman basically since he got into the building, right? His attitude, the way he acts, he's a funny, engaging personality. And then on the field, you're starting to hear some of that, power forward, making tight window, contested catches. So you're getting, I don't know how Coleman's doing in totality, but again, I'm seeing enough of those highlights that maybe it's leaning on the more positive side so far for the second round receiver.
It's an interesting combination with Josh Allen as well, because Allen is the type of quarterback that will absolutely give a guy who is not necessarily going to separate, but is a contested catch guy. Like, he's going to give him a shot. You know what I mean? Like, he will put the ball on that shoulder and trust Keon Coleman to make those catches. And so far, Keon Coleman has been making those catches. That is potentially a really big thing in Coleman's favor, having a quarterback that's willing to take the chance that this guy, he might not be open, but he's good at making those types of plays, even if statistically, the difference in being a statistically good contested catch guy last year versus, let's say, he is this year, could easily be the difference between Jordan Travis and his quarterback situation in Florida State and Josh Allen. Like, the ball location on those contested targets matters a lot. I mean, those are not all created equal, right? One, a contested target can be one that's on the correct shoulder away from a defensive back, but he's still challenging for it, versus one that's at the defensive back and you're almost breaking it up, but is theoretically still catchable. Like those are charted the same as a statistic, but are fundamentally very different passes as a receiver trying to catch the ball.
It's a great point because, again, sometimes we're guilty of maybe just let's cite the contested catch stat. Over time, we know that it tends to fluctuate, and even a guy that's great one year tends to regress. But when you do get down at the granular level, yeah, the quarterback does have a factor in that, depending on the volume of throws and the types of throws and everything. So it's a good point for Coleman.
Like that's a big reason why that's such a noisy statistic, right? Because most quarterbacks generally are not capable of that level of like pinpoint accuracy anyway, right? So even if you had a guy that was always willing to take that shot, most QBs are simply not able to like put it in the exact spot you need it to be contested but catchable all the time, which is why inherently that number is going to bounce around all over the place because the accuracy of quarterbacks is just not good enough to sustain that being a repeatable skill all the time, even for the guys that are really good at that, guys like Drake London, DeAndre Hopkins, et cetera, which is why elite contested catch guys over a long period of time are around 50%, not 70, 80, all that kind of thing.
All right, I want to wrap it up with a little bit of Giants talk. So when we're talking training camp, I'm seeing a lot of bad videos with Daniel Jones throwing the ball for whatever it's worth. That I put into the I don't care category. We already have, 5 years of evidence of what Daniel Jones is. So a couple training camp passes, even if they're bad, it's like, he's Daniel Jones. He's still Daniel Jones. It's fine. He's also coming off an ACL. So who cares if he missed a little flat route? That's okay. So I don't care about that. I do think that a couple things that came out of the last a couple of the last Hard Knocks episodes, the potential trade that the Giants turned down with the Colts. I want to get to that in a minute. But first, the draft board that got leaked. It's not even the draft board. It's the draft order that got leaked. But there's color codes on there.
The draft results and plus color codes.
Yeah, it's the draft results. You've got the color codes, and Doug Analytics on Twitter speculated, which I think makes a lot of sense here. The blue color code is an all-around good leader, teammate person. The red has medical concerns. Purple has character concerns. Pink is undersized or measurement concern. And that gray is a guy that plays multiple positions. That was what he was theorizing. We don't know what yellow means for Joe Milton. I can only assume it means best arm we've ever seen.
Absolute.
And he's just the only yellow. Absolute cannon.
Yeah, absolute howitzer designation.
This was interesting, though, because you don't get this type of insight. Of course, again, this isn't a draft board. This is the legitimate draft order. But you can see the color codes. And when you look at it closely, I think what's interesting, too, is like the Giants got 2 blues, right? They got 2 of their blues with their first 2 picks. Tyler Nubin, the safety out of Minnesota, was a blue, so a guy that they believe in a lot, whatever that designation is. And there's not a whole lot of blues in that area of the draft who are available. So I think when you're in a draft room and you're looking at this and you see the color code, it's like, of course he's our guy. He stands out. So I thought it was just an interesting view that you don't always get here.
Yeah, it's cool. I would love to know what the actual designations were. I don't think that guess on the blue is correct because so I watched this yesterday. I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, so I didn't write it down. But repeatedly, Joe Shane talked about, I think he was talking about Nubin, and he was saying he listed off 3 plus points, effectively, 3 selling points of why Nubin was a good pick to bring in. And the 3 were, he's a blue, something else, and then good leader. So like leader and blue were listed as distinct categories.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm doing something I hate, right? I'm taking, I don't know, Doug Analytics on Twitter. I'm taking what he theorized. I don't know how right he was. My guess on the blue thing is every team has the Giants player, right? I want my guy, whatever the Patriot Way guy, whatever they call that guy. If they have this guy as a blue, I'm considering that whatever their rubric is for, he's a Giants dude, right? He's a guy that fits some level of criteria that we love. And if we come away with 7 blues, we're thrilled. And that's the way they want to play. Not only blues, but like they get into this category of our type of guy.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would probably guess what that color is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I just think, I just remember watching that and being like, because that was the guess, the fact that he specifically separated those things out multiple times in that statement suggests that that's not correct. So whatever it is, I think you're right. It might be just a sort of overall, this is our type of guy composite. But who knows? It's cool seeing them all listed and seeing who the players are and who fits into those various different categories.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing I wanted to bring up was the trade offer, the specific trade offer that the Colts had for the Giants to go up to number 6. So apparently the Colts offered number 15, that's their first rounder, their second rounder, which was number 46, and a 2025 second rounder to move up to number 6. The Giants obviously turned it down. They picked Malik Neighbors. From a Colts perspective, I thought this was fascinating because there was a lot of rumors that they wanted to trade up for Brock Bowers. I don't think they're trading up to 6 to get Bowers. Maybe they were, but I do believe it was for Neighbors or Odunze. I'm assuming it was for one of those receivers. But the Colts end up coming away with the top defensive player off the board, Laiatu Latu at 15. They end up getting A.D. Mitchell at number 46, who, again, a lot of people had in the first round. And they still have their second-round pick next year. So, Sam, what do you think from a Colts perspective? Do you think this was the right move to try to get up to number 6, let's say for Neighbors or Odunze or even Bowers, or to eventually they stayed put and that's what they got?
Yeah, this I feel like could fall into the category of some of these moves you see every now and again where like the team got lucky and got saved from themselves. You know, like a team was trying to do something that would have been bad and ended up actually with a much better situation because they couldn't get what they really wanted to. So, for example, you know, the Dallas Cowboys trying to get Paxton Lynch and ended up having to settle for Dak Prescott. You got saved from your own bad decision-making there. You were trying to go after Paxton Lynch. He was obviously a total disaster, and actually Dak Prescott ends up saving your franchise and giving you the transition. Now, I'm not saying that Neighbors or Odunze or whoever they were looking for there would have been a catastrophe, so it's not in the same bracket, but Latu, I think, is a phenomenal pick for them at 15. A.D. Mitchell, it could have been on the show we've just done talking about training camp hype. He's been getting a lot of buzz and has been really impressing in camp so far, and they have next year's second. I would find it very difficult to imagine a scenario like Neighbors or Odunze would have to hit one of the very top percentiles of their potential range of outcomes to beat what they actually ended up getting and what they could still get next year based off all the information we have so far. Like, I don't know if they thought they had a shot at a guy like A.D. Mitchell, but if they did, like if they just got lucky there, you know, these are the sort of sliding doors moments that as smart as teams can be and as well as it can all be planned and as much as you might just get lucky one day and not get the thing you want, and actually that ends up being way better for you.
I mean, our friend Sando sighting, by the way, in my mentions, remember just a few months ago, our whole discussion was, do you draft the elite receiver now or do you wait? Because there's such a deep wide receiver class. The Colts were being aggressive enough that they wanted to go and get their one guy. The Giants obviously said, we want to go get our one guy. We got Malik Neighbors. He's a blue. So there's more to this, obviously, and you didn't know exactly what you were going to get. But I think every time you look at those trades, as much as I love Malik Neighbors, Odunze, I think those guys are going to be fantastic. But it is so hard for me to look at the 3, having Latu, because I think Latu is a similar prospect as Neighbors, just at a different position, right?
Yeah.
And you got a similar prospect. Let's say there's injury concerns. Let's say he's below Neighbors. But you got an A.D. Mitchell. Okay, maybe he's not a true number 1 like Neighbors, but if he becomes a good number 2, and you have a second rounder next year, and again, what we believe is a very deep draft. I mean, those decisions over time, 3 players being more than 1. I can't remember the specifics on the Will Anderson deal. It's a similar discussion. I can have 1 elite Will Anderson, or I could have, I believe they had opportunity for like a Sam Laporta, Christian Gonzalez, and Darius Robinson, right? I mean, it's like 1 versus 3 is really difficult most of the time to put it in the camp of the 1. That's why a lot of those trade simulators say that's a trade. When you trade up, you win about 30% of the time. Now, you made the point throughout the draft process, if you trade up for a blue, maybe it's a little bit better. And that's what the Colts were trying to do. They're trying to trade up for a blue chip guy. But I just love those discussions. Like when you see it play out, but even ahead of time thinking, I could have 3 players who are solid versus 1 blue chip, and those are interesting discussions.
Yeah, and so I'm not trying to make out like AD Mitchell definitely has some risk associated with him. I don't know quite the reason for him. Like his on-field tape to me was first round worthy. I don't know whether he slipped to the second round because the NFL disagreed or because there's off-field stuff. Like there were some weird reports out there in terms of character and like some stuff that felt ridiculous in terms of phrasing, right? Like, we got to stay away from the diabetes thing. That's a concern. As if, guys like Mark Andrews aren't out there dominating with diabetes. Anyway, I don't know quite what that is, but I think that's a first round talent. And even if it's risky, he actually does have the potential, I think, to end up in the similar category as Neighbors or Odunze in terms of an elite top end number one receiver. There are some guys lower down the draft at receiver who I don't think had that ability, who were genuine number twos, and they might be really good number twos, but I don't think they have that number one within their range of outcomes. Mitchell, I think, does. So they end up getting Latu, who could be in a Aiden Hutchinson, Will Anderson type of tier of edge rusher right away. AD Mitchell, who even if he's a number two, it's a really valuable thing, but actually does have that number one within his range of outcomes, and next year's second rounder that you would have had to give up to get the other guy. So there's obviously more certainty, more comfort in going after a Neighbors, who again is also apparently looking great in training camp. But I think the smart play, the playing the percentages play, is what they ended up getting, not what they tried to get.
Yeah, listen, and I just wanted to sum this up by saying great Hard Knocks insight, right? I mean, 5 episodes of behind the scenes, draft, free agency. And what we try to bring to the table, you and I, Sam, when we're talking, this is why I love having those shows January through April, because we have the same conversations that the Giants and the Colts are having, right? We have the same conversations. We're sitting here with our audience going through, do you want to trade up for this one player or do you want to trade down and have 3? And here's our evaluation on these 3 versus this one. Here's the risk associated with it. So I love that, right? We get to have behind the scenes and we got to see, a lot of times you get the trade rumors. Oh, they turned down this trade, and here's what it was rumored to be. But we got some insight as to like what the specific trades were and what they did, how they decided it. So I love that. That's some of my favorite stuff because it's exactly what we do right here.
The other interesting thing that came out of that episode, I thought, was seeing how they handled the second round. And once they done, the last episode was all about number 6 overall, what they were going to do there, who they got, what the draft looked like, who was trying to trade up. And we got a little bit of that at the start, but then it was all about day 2 and how that planned out. And they were targeting cornerbacks, right? Because obviously that was a need for this team. They had sort of zoomed in on Kool-Aid McKinstry and Kamari Lassiter. And they were like, okay, those are our 2 guys. We feel really good about them. They were both gone by the time the Giants picked. They end up pivoting. They go Tyler Nubin. They get him in the second round. And then they start zooming in on Andrew Phillips at corner. And what was interesting, I think, was they were very clear about, they felt there was a big drop-off after Phillips, right? They love Lassiter. They love McKinstry. They were gone. They really liked Andrew Phillips as well. And that's when they felt that the big drop-off hit at corner. So this is, again, it's another example of how you're not just playing the draft board, you're also looking at, well, you're playing the draft board, but paying attention to where the drops are in the talent. This is where need is a factor, right? If you actually need a player at a position to come in and be good, you can't just pivot to a different position and grab that, because like if there's a huge drop off, if Phillips is 2 rounds better than the next guy on your board, you have to take him. You can't, go a different position, grab a running back first, grab tight end. You got to take the guy before the drop hits, which is why, we preach, don't put yourself in that position before you go into the draft.
Yeah, that's it. Don't put yourself in that position. And look, what is need? Like if they wanted to just sign Stephon Gilmore to play for 1 year, do they have that in their back pocket? I would try to make sure that you have those things in your back pocket, because a draft pick is a long-term decision for the team. Stephon Gilmore is a 1-year decision for the team. You don't want to make a draft pick maybe a 1-year decision for the team. We have a need at corner. We have to take this guy. I believe in the tiers, in the drop-offs, but I would just do it more holistically across the entire board, not just a position. That's where, again, I think that's where teams, when need gets factored in, I do think that's where they end up making a few more mistakes. And there are some teams, we've had some interesting insight from some that really factor in their team into the process in different ways, right? And it's like, I don't know. I would probably lean toward not ignoring my depth chart. I'm not in the seat. It's tough to do, but I'm trying to ignore it as much as possible and focusing on the players.
Well, it just shows how it changes what you would do, right? It's inserting a bias that shouldn't be there in terms of just selecting the best players overall. That's why I think it inherently creates more mistakes, if you like, than otherwise, because like this is a perfect situation, a perfect example where they almost certainly had players higher than Andrew Phillips on their board that they would have taken if all positions were created equal, or if they had no needs to worry about, if they were just filling a roster with the best players. But they looked at it and they said, there's a massive drop after Andrew Phillips. There's no more corners we like that we think can actually come in and be, I think they used the term everyone else was I forget what they called it, project, or everyone else was something like that. It was a project type of player, whereas Phillips can come in and be the sort of quote unquote starting nickel right away. So at that point, they're like, well, we have to take him because we need that. We actually don't have one of those guys right now, and he's the last one. So they grab him, and who knows how many other players were ahead of him on the board if it was just ranked vertically and all positions were created equal. But every one of those was one they passed up because of a need, and that theoretically is just not good process.
Yeah, so I'll wrap it up with this, because some of the chat's talking about the Colts and how Samson Ebukam, he got injured, out for the season. Yeah. And again, if you were thinking about needs for the Colts, you might look and say, well, they've got Samson Ebukam, they've got Kwity Paye, Taekwon Lewis, Dio Odiingbo. They don't need an edge. But they grabbed Latu, who's the best player on the board at the time, and happens to be an edge. I mean, that's the reason for always picking the best players, because Ebukam does get hurt. Your needs do change very, very quickly. And they're also multi-year. They're not just for this year. So that's why I'm always preaching draft the best players as much as possible.
And that's another potential example of how that Colts deal, like how lucky they may have gotten just by accidentally doing things the way they did it instead of what they wanted to do, right? If they traded up, they got Malik Neighbors, they lose their picks. Now they don't draft an edge rusher until the third, fourth round, a guy that you have almost zero confidence in coming in and being a significant contributor right away. Now you got to get into the free agent veteran market, a guy that hasn't made a roster yet so far and has something, to be scared of. Instead, they have Latu, who all the projections, all of our data, all of our numbers, all of the information available to us right now says that this guy has as good a shot at as anybody recently to hit the ground running and be a good player immediately, right? If he's in that Aiden Hutchinson, Will Anderson category of sort of overall caliber, those guys were both good right away. And I think Latu has a better suite of technical pass rushing moves than either of those guys had entering the NFL. So theoretically, they've got the perfect guy to need to step in and replace a Samson Ebukam, even if they couldn't have possibly foreseen that, coming down the pipe.
Final word for today. We've got football tonight, Hall of Fame game, Bears and Texans, an actual football game. No starters, I don't think, probably on either side. But hey, we'll get to watch a little bit of football tonight. And then I'll be back in studio Monday, Sam. We'll be back here again, just back together again.
Beautiful. That's all we need.
Any other final word from you?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good. You've been watching the Olympics? We did a brief Olympics coverage?
No
Olympics in the Palazzolo household.
I don't know. I'm in and out trying to, kids are in the pool, running around the street here. We got a lot going on here.
Well, obviously.
I'm football, Sam. I'm football all day, Sam. That's what I do.
Obviously, basketball is the most obvious outcome for most of your kids, right? Based off their current dimensions and projected dimensions. I don't
know. Watching them all move right now, I don't know if there's any sport.
Well, here's where I'm going to save you. I wouldn't overlook swimming. Those guys are all giant, long freak shows as well. Like, get them in a pool and say, lap, child, lap. You can have a whole family.
We'll do it right now before we get in the van. We'll jump in the pool. Dad's got a pool back here. We'll jump in, get them training, then we'll get in the van and get out of here.
You can have a whole family of Michael Phelpses in the works.
That's a good idea. Might think about that. So did you have quick Olympics analysis here?
No, that was it. I mean, there's a couple of fun things that are funny. Did you see the Turkish guy, like the sharpshooter, the pistol guy?
No.
So Olympic shooting with the, one-hand pistol thing, they've all got this like scaffolding frame of lenses and stuff to like reduce glare and take one of your eyes away. Like, it's ridiculous looking setup. Turkey sent this guy who was like 50, just rocked up with a set of glasses and his hands in his pocket, just like won a silver medal.
Love it. That's great.
I like that too. Yeah.
I mean, the margin for error for Olympians is so tight. It is pretty impressive. I'm a former teammate of famous Olympian Bodie Miller, the skier.
Yeah. How are you a teammate of him?
He came and played for the Nashua Pride. So he was my teammate for a night playing left field. So didn't get a hit.
Oh, what do we got here?
We have a graphic.
There you go.
Of the sharpshooter. There he is.
Legend.
Just looks like a high-end athlete. Looks like a silver medalist athlete.
It's perfect.
For sure.
Meanwhile, you got all these people out there with like lenses and shades and stuff hanging off there. He just rocks up there with a set of prescription glasses and fires away.
I love it. All right, man. That's it for us today. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday with more PFF NFL Podcast.